Welcome back to Live from Paris. Time to get a business update with Owen Fairclough. Good morning. Owen, we're going to start with a look at the markets. Tokyo's holding on to some gains, so maybe there is some festive cheer for investors after all.
Well, it's about time, Claire, absolutely. Even Olympus shares are doing quite well today. A real reversal of fortune, up 17% at one day. At one point, I should say, during the trading day. The Nikkei has not long closed. You can see there, not spectacular gains, but after yesterday's big sell-off, perhaps that's what investors will take right now, around 0.5% up. The Hang Seng in similar territory and still trading. You can see those jitters about where North Korea is going may still exist for the politicians, but for investors, at least in Shanghai and in Seoul, they're feeling a little bit better about North Korea right now, as things stand at least.
Now, cleaning up the balance sheet of Spain PLC, new Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy officially starts work this Tuesday. He won an overwhelming mandate to continue the fiscal discipline imposed by his predecessor. But Spain's banks won't be spared some tough love either. They're straining under 130 billion euros of bad debt accumulated during the boom years. William Edwards has more.
He himself admits it's likely to be a thankless task. But Spain's new Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, says the government must make further strides to cut the country's deficit.
For the next year, we will have to reduce our deficit by 16.5 billion euros. That is the objective, that is our promise, and we will strive for it.
The speech was the first time Rajoy has outlined his economic vision in any detail. He said the public sector will see a hiring freeze and further job cuts, while spending will be cut across all sectors except for pensions. Spain's banks will also see reform. The new Prime Minister said that more mergers were needed and that they still have to write down the full costs of the country's property bubble. The challenge will be to bring down the deficit to 4.4% while maintaining growth and helping bring down unemployment, which is as high as 46% among under 25s. Rajoy will also be closely watched by the bond markets. The Eurozone debt crisis has seen Spain's cost of borrowing hit record highs in recent months. Altogether, it'll be a tricky balancing act, and it all depends on there being no more nasty shocks from the rest of the Eurozone.
And just while we're talking financing of countries, worth noting that Europe, at least the 26 states that make up the EU, have managed to find some agreement on putting around 150 billion euros of new loans into the IMF that, in theory, could come back to Europe in the event of another sovereign crisis. The problem, though, is that the UK is once again not on board with this. The target, as you can see there, was for around 200 billion euros of new loans going to the IMF, but the UK confirmed yesterday that it wasn't going to put in this time around 50 billion euros of its own contribution. That's not to say that the UK is saying definitively no. They're leaving the option open to potentially chip into that pot next year. But for now, at least, the message is we're not helping you out. Again, just sort of adds to the whole tensions in Europe, Claire, with David Cameron not signing up to that new so-called fiscal compact. We should get a few more of the day's business headlines for you now. The European consortium behind the Eurofighter has lost out to Lockheed Martin in an $8 billion deal to supply Japan's Air Force. Tokyo has announced it'll buy 42 of the US-made F-35 fighter jets. South Korea's government is expected to follow suit with an order for up to 60 F-35s.
AT&T will have to pay a $4 billion breakup fee to T-Mobile for abandoning their merger. The US telecoms giant fell foul of anti-competition regulators over the deal to buy its German rival's wireless unit. Analysts say T-Mobile must now find an alternative to get rid of its loss-making US operation, while AT&T looks for a solution to expanding its wireless coverage.
And Eldorado Gold is promising a $2 billion investment in Greece after acquiring Canadian rival European Goldfields. The firm says it will create 2,000 jobs as part of an expansion in southern Europe over the next few years. The Greek government is expected to auction new licenses for northern Greece next year. Eldorado says the region is, in its words, very prospective. I think that means there's a lot of gold there, potentially.
Next, outsourcing the outsourcers. If you use telephone banking regularly, you'll know that India is the world champion of call centres. But for how much longer? The country that created a boom industry from taking on the West customer service is increasingly finding its jobs outsourced to fast emerging rivals. Vikram Singh sent us this report.
In the global capital of outsourcing, a peculiar problem. Jobs are being outsourced. A scenario difficult to imagine 10 years ago, but a reality today. Aegis, one of the largest Indian outsourcing companies, has moved 80% of its international call center operations to the Philippines.
Very differentiated position. Clearly we see there's a shift. If it is offshore, very clearly Philippines has become the destination for especially American companies. When we acquired People Support, which is now Aegis Philippines, we started with about 6,000 people. As we speak, we are more than 12,500 people in Philippines.
Aegis is part of a larger trend. 13 Indian companies specializing in outsourcing have recently opened offices outside India.
Thank you for holding the line, Maggie. And Maggie, I've just reset the password. If you'd like to make a note of that, please.
350,000 Indians work remotely for foreign clients, selling products and offering after-sales services of all sorts. More than half of the customers are Americans. India's traditional advantage has been its large pool of low-wage English-speaking workers. But in today's increasingly competitive marketplace, that's not enough.
Clearly, as far as the Philippines is concerned, given the cultural affinity with the U.S., the Filipino accent is much closer to the U.S. accent than the Indian accent clearly is, and therefore, for customer service work, which requires intimate, contact with the customers and processes which involve a deep interaction with the customers, clearly there is advantage in locating to that particular country.
The outlook continues to be gloomy for the Indian outsourcing sector. A newly proposed law in the United States could see more American companies shutting their operations in India.
And before we go, apparently it's possible to rent a reindeer for the holidays.
It's not just Santa Claus that has reindeer. Well, indeed, it has them all around the year, I should say. But it appears that renting a reindeer is on the up, at least in the UK, despite being a country in austere times where retailers are struggling to make ends meet in the run up to Christmas. People who have rent-a-reindeer businesses are reporting rentals up by 25%. Many reporting that they're fully booked through Christmas, renting them out to people who want Christmas parties with perhaps just that extra special element. It's not cheap, though. I think it'll set you back around £500 if you want a reindeer or indeed a caribou for your festive occasion.
Are you tempted?
What can I say? I'm never been that great with animals.
Our producer says he might want one, so we might have to give him the all the details, the contact details for that. Thanks very much.
It's clearing up after them that I wouldn't really fancy too much.
True. Okay, I've gone off the idea now. All right, thanks very much, Owen, for that business update. That's it from me for now. Do stay tuned to France 24. All the latest headlines coming up in just a couple of minutes.